Vaccine progress slows, and we start to wonder how many Americans are willing, if not eager, to roll up their sleeves. And as we've seen in other states, Republicans and Democrats in Lansing at vast odds over election laws. Today is Sunday, May 9th, 2021, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint and a very happy Mother's Day. Big Detroit news breaking Friday afternoon. Police Chief James Craig set to retire after 8 years as chief. Talk of his political future is already percolating, but of more immediate concern is who will lead the department now at such a critical moment in American law enforcement. We expect to learn more tomorrow. But today, let's dial in on the shot. As the pandemic locked us down, we clung to the promise of the COVID vaccine. That was the key to getting back to normal life. And yet, while more than 30% of Americans are now fully vaccinated, demand keeps falling, and we start to wonder, what's the ceiling on vaccinations? How many people are just going to say no, especially with the misinformation about the vaccines still pouring forth from way too many people who know better? This morning, two Wayne State doctors who served as principal investigators on both the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, are they worried about people selling the vaccine short? Also today, we're going to dig into the efforts in Lansing to reform Michigan's voting laws. Is it an effort to ensure our elections are reliably and efficiently run, or is it an effort at voter suppression? Two state senators are here to talk about that. I'll also let them weigh in on the newest revelations about the governor's pandemic travels. All that and a new beat for Vicki Thomas today on Flashpoint. Well, as you know, Governor Whitmer has now tied Michigan's reopening phases to our vaccination rates. This past week, the rules around masks changed. Once we get to 55% vaccinated, office and workspace rules will change, and so on, right up to 70%. But that 70% figure starts to look very difficult to hit. What to do about vaccine hesitancy? We're going to talk about it now with two doctors from Wayne State who played critical roles in the development of the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Dr. Paul Kilgore is an associate professor of pharmacy practice at WSU, and Dr. Marco Zervos is the assistant dean of global affairs. Gentlemen, I'm so glad to have you both here. Dr. Zervos, let me start with you and just give me your general thoughts on what you're hearing and what you're seeing in the reasons behind people who right now are still very hesitant to roll up their sleeves and get this vaccine.
Well, there really are two or three groups of people. They're the people that were very enthusiastic about getting the vaccine and were waiting in line to get it and pushing us to get the vaccine. There's those that have questions about it, and it's understandable to have questions about the vaccine, and then those that are outright hesitant. You know, in terms of the people that have questions, they have questions about safety. They have questions about, has it been tested long enough to be used? Those that have outright hesitancy, you know, we also understand that, and some of the reasons around that are mistrust of health systems. Sure. With some of the things that have happened in the past.
Dr. Kilgore, when people say to you that this has been so rushed, we're used to waiting years for a vaccine, and this one, almost by definition, has to be less reliable and more dangerous given how quickly it came to us. How do you handle that, given you were someone who worked on these studies?
Yeah, Devin, it's a great question. Actually, over the past several months, I've talked to hundreds of people literally about the same question. So here's what people should know. Back 20, 30 years ago, we would evaluate a vaccine and actually get it approved just by vaccinating in studies, controlled trials, a few thousand people. Now with the COVID-19 vaccines, we've actually, over the past several months, vaccinated millions of people. And actually during the trials, there was over 100,000 people enrolled worldwide. So the safety data that we have on these vaccines is unequivocal. It's unquestionable. These vaccines are very safe. That means the Pfizer, the Johnson & Johnson, and the Moderna vaccines are very safe for adults. We also know they're safe for women, and this has been a really important topic that we wanted to get out information on. Safe for pregnant women, and now we have new data showing that the vaccines are not only safe, but very effective in younger children, teenagers. So good news coming out of the recent studies.
What do you suppose the cases that we've seen with blood clots involving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the sort of pause that we had, what has that done to the overall confidence that people have in all of the vaccines?
So one of the things that we've seen is that it did actually have an impact. So there was a downturn in vaccination rates. There's no doubt about it. We are seeing an uptick, though, in many locations, and popularity among younger people is now rising. In fact, just yesterday, I was over at Jalen Rose Leadership Academy in Detroit, and I was there seeing young people receiving the vaccine. So that was really encouraging, and that program from the Global Health Initiative at Henry Ford Health System in partnership with Wayne State University is really making an impact on Detroiters.
Dr. Zervos, there's a lot of people who keep pointing out that this is still only these vaccines still only have emergency use authorization. Pfizer has now asked for it to be fully approved. What would the difference be in full approval versus emergency use authorization?
Well, the emergency use means that the efficacy, the importance of the vaccine far outweighs any potential risks. It's gone through extensive clinical trials, over 100,000 people between the three doses of the vaccine. It's been used in, I think there have been over 250 million doses that have been given in the United States. So the full approval happens after there's more real world experience with the vaccine, which has happened, and we anticipate there'll be a full approval. But I think besides the knowledge that we have that the vaccine is safe, we know that it's very effective, and we know that COVID remains a very serious problem, and we know that COVID can put somebody in the hospital and people can die from it. So that's I think the balance that we need to keep in mind.
Dr. Kilgore, we are also starting to, I think, become a little bit more realistic about the fact that we're very likely going to need booster vaccines after about a year or so. People are already so fatigued by this entire ordeal. I worry about, if we start talking about booster shots being necessary, what that does to the appetite for vaccines.
So it's one step at a time, Devin, and I think one thing that people should realize is the vaccines that we have now do have effectiveness against the variants. For example, the UK, South African variant, those variants can be covered by the vaccine to a large extent. Now, we also want to make sure that in the case that we have a new variant that is not well covered by these vaccines that we have now, we want to have in our armamentarium that booster dose, which would cover new variants. And that's being done right now. In fact, later this month, we anticipate starting a new study of a variant booster vaccine. But we're going to take it one step at a time. No guarantee that we're going to need it, but we want to make sure that we have it just in case.
And Dr. Zervos, these variants, that's another big part of the problem we have of those thinking that they can just opt out and us thinking that it's okay if you don't want to get the vaccine. The people who don't get the vaccine allow the variants to proliferate, and the new variants that may come along might not be covered by the vaccine that I and so many others have received, right?
Right. We have at least 4 different variants. We have the UK variant, which is very predominant, spreading very quickly in Michigan and other states. We have other variants. We have the South African. We've had the Brazil strain. We have other variant strains that are spreading. And if we don't do a better job of vaccinating the public, we're going to get more variant strains. We're going to get more spread of those strains, and some of them could end up being more contagious. Some of them could even potentially be more deadly. So we got to get these vaccines around. Dr. Kilgore, Dr. Zervos, you are both part of the amazing team that has really brought about something we've never really seen before in answering a pandemic like this across the world. Thank you so much for that, and thanks for the time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Back with more on Flashpoint in just a minute.
Hi, I'm David Hall, and now is the time to refinance your home loan. Take years off your loan, lower your payment, consolidate some debt. Hall Financial's ready to help you achieve your goals. Don't miss out on historically low rates. Go to davidhallmortgage.com.
For 81 years, we've been here for Michigan. From day one to year 100. Committed to the communities we call home, because we're here for it all and always will be. Confidence comes with every card. We're here for you. With resources that make connecting with your coverage and getting the care you need easier than ever before. We're here for it all and always will be. Confidence comes with every card.
Spring driving is here, and the countdown to luxury has begun at your local Cadillac showroom. Experience the iconic style and bold sophistication in a Cadillac SUV or sedan. Reward yourself and move up to a Cadillac.
GM employees and eligible family members with a current eligible GM lease. Get this low mileage lease on this 2021 Cadillac XT5 for $369 per month.
Guys, breakfast! I'm leaving for McDonald's in 5 seconds.
There's a meal for every morning. Mix and match these breakfast faves, 2 for just $5.
You know, the state of Georgia adopted a new slate of election laws. The reverberations ran across the country. They're still being sorted out. Well, in Lansing, some of the very same ideas are being considered right now for Michigan elections. I want to talk about that this morning with two state senators. Democrat Marshall Bullock is here, and so is Republican and the former Secretary of State Ruth Johnson, who knows a thing or two about elections. We'll get to election law really quickly, but right off the top, if I could, I'd like you both to weigh in quickly on the news that came this past week via Charlie Duff at Deadline Detroit that Governor Whitmer made her pandemic trip to Florida to see her father on a jet that is owned by 3 businesses who contribute quite a bit politically. Is this a problem, or is it much ado about nothing? Senator Johnson, let me start with you.
Well, first of all, I think that when you're the governor, you have to be a good role model. And if you make rules for the rest of us to follow, then you need to follow them too. And I think that was the first disappointment. We have to inspire people. It's not really helpful just to make laws or rules or for the governor to state certain things that she doesn't follow herself. And yes, it's a big problem when you push businesses that have a jet to give you a ride that's worth tens of thousands of dollars without really disclosing it. And actually, she said that she didn't go. And I really do think that as elected officials, our job is to inspire. And we have to do that with transparency and honesty. And when that doesn't exist, our state just divides.
And of course, she talked a lot about transparency in her campaign days. Senator Bullock, your thoughts?
Actually, I'm more of a, it was a personal matter, you know, to see her elderly father. I know the stories come out that she took a private jet. I don't know how you move around the country without somebody knowing, you know, everything. When she took a trip to go see what is now President Biden before he was vice president, they're following you everywhere. So it's a personal matter to go see her father. So I kind of think it's a much to do about nothing, actually.
Well, when political leaders accept benefits or contributions or things of value, it needs to be reported or disclosed, doesn't it?
Yeah. I agree with the transparency portion, and I can't speak for the governor on the disclosure of that, but yes, you do.
Let's move to what the debate that's going on right now in Lansing. Senator Johnson, I think there are a lot of people who are worried that this continued fight over that we need to firm up and change our election law continues to feed the narrative that there's been something so wrong with the last election when we found that examples of fraud in 2020 were actually fewer than we found in 2016. Doesn't this continually feed a false narrative?
Well, we did have several really big changes, and one was in November of 2018, we did pass a Proposal 3, that changed how we did elections substantially. And also, the Secretary of State made many different changes without going through the legislative process. With COVID, we had a lot of changes. And we did have a lot of times best practices weren't used. There were 2 people that were charged with hurting people as far as disenfranchising voters on a large scale. And we also know that the absentee ballot application was done without approval by the legislature, and that's contrary to Michigan law. And also the Secretary of State changed the policies that the clerks have to follow to eliminate verifying residency of a voter. And she sent out over 800,000 pre-filled out absentee ballot requests to people that are not qualified to vote in Michigan, often in another state. Some were dead, a few non-citizens and underage. That was a job done by local clerks for decades and decades, and she took that over and used a list that's largely flawed and sent out over 800,000 pre-filled out forms to people to vote in Michigan. It was absentee ballot requests forms.
Senator Bullock, at the very base of it, part of what she's talking about here is that we clearly have a big clerical task ahead of us just to clean up these voter rolls. There's nothing wrong with doing that, is there?
There's nothing wrong with cleaning up the voters' task rolls, but at the end of the day, we voted to expand voting rights. We made it like no excuse, absentee ballots. And this theory of dead folks are voting or folks are voting. If a ballot goes out to someone erroneously, it doesn't come back. It's not like the person in the house fills out 9 ballots from their same house after someone's dead. Senator Johnson was the Secretary of State. And in 2016 and 18, she touted that the clerks are rated some of the best here in the country and that our process was ensured with integrity and security. And these things and all of the ballot and tabulators things were great. And we are one of the ranked in the country. And for us to believe that it went to autumn be damn hell in 2 years is really like mind blowing for me.
Senator Johnson, what do you do with that fact that voters in Michigan sort of spoke and basically said they want voting to be easier? They want more people to be able to cast these absentee ballots, and that seems at odds to many of those same voters to see that Republicans, in their eyes, are trying to make it harder to vote in Michigan.
Well, actually, I was, when I ran for Secretary of State, I ran on no reason absentee or mail-in ballots for everyone with nuts and bolts that protected the integrity of it. We have had huge changes. Prop 3 says we don't need to see a warm body anymore. Same-day registration, which we can't compare with other places. We have a Secretary of State that said even if they're flagged in the qualified voter file as voting in another state, don't ask them any more questions like we used to. Don't identify where they get to vote. They can vote in several states, and we don't have a system to catch that. And all these things are new changes, and I think it's really important not to ignore them, to make people feel secure in knowing that their vote will count. They will not be disenfranchised, or their voice will be heard, and we do that by making it easier to vote, but harder to cheat. And the legislation we're coming up with,
I find that interesting. I find that we're making it easier to vote while we put in all of these restrictions, and then harder to cheat, but yet we've not proven that anyone has cheated, and that baffles me.
I would say that we have proof of a number of things. There's 2 people that have been charged with just out-and-out violation of the law, with robocalls telling people they could go vote the next day. Don't come because of COVID, don't come because of the lines. We also know that we really didn't have a system put in place for so many absentees that would make sure and ensure that for the public that it was done in a good way. We know that there's cracks in the dam. We have lots of information that we know with all these changes that have been made recently, and with some of the changes the current Secretary of State made without going through the legislative process, that there's problems. And all we have to do is make sure that we can fix them, we can clean them up, that we can make sure that it is easier to vote and harder to cheat. And one of the biggest misnomers is that the Republicans somehow are doing something wrong. Everyone knows the governor, who is a Democrat, has to sign these bills, has to be bipartisan.
I got to get to a break, but Senator Bullock, there's a lot of discussion then about whether it's a bridge too far to require an ID of a voter. Is that asking too much to make sure that the person who's voting is who they say they are?
In general, you want some identification, but all kinds of things happen. We have undocumented citizens here in the city in the state of Michigan. Folks lose an ID. Folks misplace an ID, but they still want to be obligated to vote. That's their right. And so to hold a series of barriers to restrict them from voting is also like amoral.
I got to get to a break, but I'm delighted to have the two of you here. I know you both enjoy sparring and being together with each other. So thanks so much for being the two that we've talked to today. Stay safe and happy Mother's Day as well, Ruth.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being on, Kevin.
You bet.
And it's always good to see you, Senator.
I'll hug you when I see you on Tuesday.
There we go. Peace in our time. Quick break. Back with more in just a minute.
This is not just a mask. It's a bridge to better days. The path back to togetherness and protection for those we love. So until we all get the COVID-19 vaccine and build community immunity, which will take time, stay careful, mask up, and social distance. Spread hope, not COVID.
At Kroger, keeping food fresher than fresh means being on your A game every hour of every day. Sure, it's more work for us, but it's more fresh for you. And that's why everything at Kroger comes guaranteed fresh, or we'll make it right. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Come on, come in, let the fun begin.
Play Michigan Lottery online. It's the one place you'll find exclusive games like Queen of Diamonds and Michigan Cash Draw. Plus Powerball and Mega Millions that can reach $1 billion. It's easy to cash out, online, or at your favorite store. And all of the proceeds support Michigan businesses and schools. Get 100% match on your first deposit, plus free games. Sign up with promo code TV.
So play on, Michigan, 'cause we all win.
Motherhood is messy. You're always working overtime, even before a pandemic. And new moms know the days can be long.
But the years fly by, and suddenly you're counseling tweens.
Tackling the teenage years while still loving little.
To all you moms who know that feeling, happy Mother's Day.
And tonight at 11, Local 4 moms get real on parenting in the pandemic.
The cooking never stops.
Tonight at 11 on Local 4 News.
You know, I hate to refer to Vicki Thomas as one of the deans of Detroit broadcast journalism. That too often seems attached to longevity rather than expertise. But in Vicki's case, it is absolutely attached to expertise. She is leaving her post at WWJ News Radio after 30 years to become the communications director for the city of Detroit. And it is really good to have Vicki Thomas back on our airwaves again. Vicki, I joked when we did the story about your decision that you were going over to the dark side. I'm going to assume that I'm not the only person who's made that joke to you.
You are not. You are not. And guess what my response is? I'm going over to the bright side. We're going to really crank out some information that residents can use. And I'm just really excited about it. So, no, I don't consider it the dark side at all, Devin. And thank you for having me back. It's been a minute. And I just want to take a minute to thank Marla Drutz and all the folks at WDIV Local 4 for supporting me over these years through NABJ and otherwise. And yeah, I will be in touch for sure in this new role.
Yeah, we might hear from you more, I suppose, because obviously you and I are often on the air at the same time. But I think that you are going to be missed in the fabric of Detroit journalism because, and in fact, you mentioned NABJ. You've been a mentor to a lot of other young minority journalists. We don't have enough of them in our profession, as you know. And here you are, one of the leading lights of that with your involvement with NABJ, leaving the field. Any misgivings about that?
Not at all, because you know what, Devin? If it were not for NABJ, I wouldn't have gotten the job at WWJ. And I've been a part of NABJ for just about my entire career. Yeah. So I will still be involved with NABJ, and I will still mentor. We just kicked off a mentoring program here in Detroit, the Detroit chapter, and we are really excited. Chanel Stitt is leading that effort, and I've already stepped up to be a mentor to one of our budding journalists.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I would expect nothing less from the many years that I've known you and the way that you feel about helping those around you. But Vicki, you also know, as as a journalist, we all have had our own sets of frustrations when we deal with communications directors and press secretaries of the politicians that we cover, and we roll our eyes and we just throw up our hands at obfuscation and misdirection and not being forthcoming with things. So tell me a little bit about how a journalist goes to the other side of that relationship.
Well, you know what, Devin, having been on the other side as a reporter, I know exactly what you're saying, and I certainly hope to be able to set a new standard because, you know me, I'm pretty much forthright, and, you know, I try to get down to business. I'm a hard worker, and, you know, if you run into stonewalling or whatever the case may be, roadblocks, I'm here to help.
You know, when you get some of the journalists like you and I who've been around the block a time or two together, we kind of kvetch a lot. And we sound like grumpy old men about, you know, it's just not the way it used to be. What do you think about the state of journalism right now, given where we are coming out of this last election cycle?
You know what, Devin, that it just puzzles me in one sense that, you know, the traditional journalism role is changing so much.
Yeah.
I think there'll still be a role for traditional journalists, but just the workload, issues like that, I'm concerned about my colleagues in the media. And also on the flip side of that, in the new media and outside of traditional journalism, I think people have so many more opportunities. They're creating their own thing. They're doing their own thing, whether it be through social media, and they're, you know, catching on in many cases. So I think in that respect, you know, things are hopeful, but I'm still really concerned about the state of traditional journalism.
Yeah, you and I both. Well, it's going to be a fascinating time for you to head to city. I don't know if anybody's mentioned to you, it's an election year in the mayor's office, so this could be a really crazy year. But Vicki, best of luck.
Well, you know what?
Go ahead, quickly.
Devin, I wouldn't have taken the job if I didn't think he would win.
I suppose there's a fair statement being made in you taking it, that's for sure. Vicki, best of luck in your new venture, and thanks so much for all the years of great work at WWJ.
Thank you, Devin. I appreciate it. Great to be back on Flashpoint.
You bet. The one and only Vicki Thomas, and that's going to do it for Flashpoint. Meet the Press coming up next. Have a great week. We'll see you next time right back here on Sunday.